Some things you've been told about ancient Egypt aren't just wrong, they're pure myth. These 5 stories are still fooling the world, and maybe even you. Myth number 1, pyramids were built by slaves. You've probably imagined it 1,000 times. A sea of sweaty slaves whipped under the scorching Egyptian sun, dragging massive stones to build the Great Pyramids. Hollywood says yes. Your 7th grade history textbook probably said yes. But Egyptologists, they're like, absolutely not. Truth, they were built by highly skilled workers who were actually paid, with food, beer, and housing. Yeah, ancient Egypt had better labor conditions than some modern startups. Evidence shows they ate like kings. We're talking beef, fish, bread, beer. Basically the ancient Mediterranean version of a protein shake and a pub crawl. They worked in rotating crews, got medical attention when injured, and were even buried with honor. That's not exactly how you treat slaves. That's how you treat the guys keeping your entire national flex on schedule. And let's not forget, these pyramids weren't slapped together. We're talking millimeter-level precision, massive logistics, and stonework that still makes modern engineers cry a little. You don't get that from random captives with no training. You get that from artisans, architects, and labor crews who knew what they were doing. In the 1990s, archaeologists uncovered entire worker villages next to the pyramids, with real homes, graves, bread ovens, and even hieroglyphic graffiti. Slaves don't usually get honored in tombs. These guys did. They weren't whipped. They were respected, which makes sense when you're hauling 2.5-ton stones with 0 hydraulics and no weekends. That's not to say slavery didn't exist in ancient Egypt. It definitely did. But not the brutal, lifelong chattel slavery we associate with later history. These workers, they were likely seasonal conscripts, farmers in the off-season, or full-time specialists, not shackled prisoners of war. Myth number 2, the Library of Alexandria was destroyed overnight. In one tragic night, the greatest library of the ancient world was reduced to ashes, and with it, humanity lost all its ancient wisdom. Cue sad violin, cue tearful scholars. Not quite. The Library of Alexandria didn't go down in one glorious inferno. It didn't get a dramatic final scene. Instead, it slowly fizzled out like a birthday candle in a wind tunnel. Less tragedy, more budget cuts, and administrative neglect. Sure, there were a few fires. Julius Caesar might have lit part of it up by accident during a battle around 48 BCE. But that wasn't the Big Bang. It was more like a mild data breach. Over the centuries, scrolls were moved, copied poorly, misplaced, or just left to rot. Imagine trying to preserve all of Wikipedia on papyrus in a building with 0 climate control and infinite political drama. By the time the final blow came, centuries later, the library was already a shell of its former self. It didn't explode in flames. It drowned in paperwork, politics, and people not wanting to pay for maintenance. Myth number 3. Ancient Egyptian were obsessed with death. Most of you guys should think of the ancient Egyptian as a civilization death-obsessed. Mummy makers, entombing cats, painting skulls, whispering spells in the dark. Basically the original Goths, right? Wrong. Ancient Egyptians weren't obsessed with death. They were obsessed with life. They loved it. So much, in fact, that they weren't ready to call it quits just because their body gave out. All that tomb building, embalming, and spell writing, it wasn't gloomy. It was preparation. They wanted to keep the party going in the next world. And they didn't just prepare. They went all out. Step 1, take out the squishy stuff. Yep, organs removed. The stomach, liver, lungs, and intestines went into cute little jars called canopic jars, one for each organ, one for each protective god. Think of it like Tupperware, but make it sacred. The brain, that got the special treatment. They yanked it out through the nose with a hook, because apparently nothing says eternal rest like a nostril lobotomy. Step 2, dry out the body using a salt called natron, like turning your loved one into a human beef jerky. This took 40 days. No rush. You've got eternity. Step 3, wrap it up. Hundreds of meters of linen, amulets slipped between layers, magic spells whispered to protect the body. Basically, the ancient Egyptian version of bubble wrap meets religious ritual. Oh, and they loaded that tomb with gear, because apparently eternity is no place to travel light. Jewelry and gold? Of course. Furniture? Yep, even chairs. Food and wine? Packed and labeled. Servant statues called ushabtis? They do your chores in the afterlife. Imagine if your will included, please preserve my liver and leave me snacks for the afterlife. Also, bury me with my pets and a boat, just in case. To them, death wasn't the end. It was a transition, like moving neighborhoods, from downtown Cairo to eternal beachside resort with gods. So yeah, mummification was intense, but it wasn't morbid. It was spiritual, symbolic, and very detail-oriented. Myth number 4. All pharaohs were ethnically Egyptians. When you picture a pharaoh, you're probably thinking born on the Nile, raised in a palace, Egyptian as papyrus dipped in honey. But here's the plot twist. Not all pharaohs were ethnically Egyptian. Some, total imports. Let's start with the Nubians, rulers from the south, present-day Sudan. In the 25th dynasty, these kings took control of Egypt and ruled it so well they're sometimes called the Black Pharaohs. They didn't just borrow the title. They went full pharaoh. Pyramids, temples, royal bling, the works. Then, centuries later, came the Ptolemies, a dynasty of rulers descended from Greeks who rolled in with Alexander the Great. They ruled Egypt for 300 years, while being technically foreigners in fancy sandals. And yes, that includes Cleopatra, but you already know all about her from our other video. And if you don't, go watch it after this. Egyptian history wasn't some clean, pure bloodline. It was more like a 4,000-year dynastic reality show with surprise guests, regional alliances, and more plot twists than a telenovela. So no, not every pharaoh was Egyptian by birth, but they were pharaohs all the same. Robes, gods, eyeliner, and all. Myth number 5, mummies were cursed. Legend has it, if you disturb a tomb, you're doomed. The mummies inside, they don't just lie there. They wait for revenge. You know the story. The great archaeologist opens the sarcophagus, and then bam, a plague, a death, a weird curse. But is it true? Spoiler alert? No, it's obviously all Hollywood fantasy. The myth of the cursed mummy? It was made up by the Western media, mainly for a good story. That's it. That whole tomb curse drama, just pulp fiction, sensationalized headlines, and the occasional archaeologist in need of a PR boost. If that were the case, we wouldn't have had to pull our hair out every time we discovered tombs that had already been looted. Here's the truth. Ancient Egyptians believed in protecting tombs from thieves, but they didn't bother with death threats or vengeful ghosts. If anything was cursed, it was the accuracy of those Indiana Jones scripts. Ancient Egyptians weren't sitting around crafting vengeful messages for grave robbers. They were too busy worrying about the afterlife and, making sure their tomb was stocked with snacks and board games for the after party. So if you happen to stumble upon a tomb, don't worry. Just don't take the gold. Otherwise, you'll only be cursed with your conscience. All right, fellow history buffs, you've learned the truth behind 5 ancient Egyptian myths. If you're hungry for more myth-busting adventures, hit that like button, subscribe, and tell us in the comments what civilization you'd like us to tackle in the next video. See you in the next one.